morning, everyone. My name is Rachel Carruthers, and I am the events manager here at the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for joining us this morning for the fifth and final installment of our second season of Ideas, our Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Advancement series. Ideas, presented by Springborn Staffing, is a virtual DEI training series hosted by the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce in partnership with Visit Portland. This second season has covered various areas of DEI training in an effort to help business owners and employees create more welcoming workplaces. The Chamber continues to collaborate with the Portland region's business community to facilitate programs, initiatives, and provide resources to make our region welcoming to all. Our Ideas series is a great result of that work. Season 1 was focused on providing racial equity training that covered inclusive language and workplace policies to diversity recruiting and the process of appropriately completing a company equity assessment. Following that very successful inaugural season in spring 2024, the Chamber and its partners reached out to the business community for input and found that there was much more work to be done. This season, we've expanded our training to include other areas of essential DEI training, such as LGBTQ+ awareness, ageism in the workplace, neurodiversity, navigating trauma in the workplace, and racial equity in hiring and workforce retention. We've also been able to expand our reach, partnering with Springborn Staffing and Visit Portland, both of which have expressed their shared passion for providing free and accessible resources to all those looking to expand their DEI training, thus fostering a healthier workforce and a workplace culture that is welcoming to all throughout the region. Today's topic, Hire to Inspire, Racial Equity from Recruitment to Retention, is presented by Adila Muhammad, founder and executive director of The Third Place, and David Pease, senior vice president, director of Talent, Diversity, and Inclusion at Bangor Savings Bank. In today's session, Adila and David will have an active discussion on the ways racial equity appears in recruitment, hiring, and employee retention. This training is meant to be interactive, so please join in on their discussion in the YouTube chat. Adila and David will prompt you with questions throughout the training this morning. Whether you are just getting started or you're refining existing practices, the goal of today's discussion is to help you shift from intention to impact. Like all the Chamber's virtual signature events, today's presentation is free, will be recorded, and made available for free replay on the Chamber's website and YouTube page. To keep up to date on all the Chamber's news and events, visit our website, portlandregion.com. Check out our events page and sign up for our weekly email newsletter while you're there. Follow us on social media for real-time updates as well. Links to socials can be found at the bottom of our homepage at portlandregion.com. Before we begin today's program, I just want to remind everyone that we're using a platform called StreamYard. This platform provides improved production and interactive elements that truly enhance our virtual events. On that note, as I mentioned earlier, I'd like to point out that when you have questions for our presenters today, you can type them in the YouTube chat throughout the presentation. Our speakers will prompt the audience today throughout the presentation with questions to open up the conversation to everyone in attendance. But also, please feel free to ask questions throughout the training as well. Adila and David will answer them when appropriate. We will also reserve time at the end of the presentation for a Q&A session. Long story short, please do engage with us in the chat throughout today's training. Now, at this point, I'd like to introduce Ken DeSimone, president of Springborn Staffing, our Ideas season-long presenting sponsor.
Thanks, Rachel. Good morning, everyone. I'm Ken DeSimone, president of Springborn Staffing. We're a full-service recruiting agency right here in Portland. Thanks so much for joining us today. It's truly been an honor playing a very small part in this series on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. At Springborn, we see firsthand how diverse teams drive innovation, improve performance, and create more meaningful connections with customers and communities. We're really excited today for an engaging session with Adila and David that examines how racial inequities impact all facets of the employee journey, from recruiting and hiring to employee retention and engagement. We look forward to practical guidance for creating workplaces where inclusion is embedded in everyday decisions, because real equity isn't built over time. It is built over time, not in a single day. If you're wondering how we can create a more diverse workforce in your organization, let's share some ideas over a cup of coffee sometime. From all of us here at Springborn Staffing, thank you so much for being here, and let's make the most of today's opportunity to learn, share, and act for a better, more inclusive future. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Ken. Now, I don't want to take any more time away from our presenters this morning, so with that, I will hand things over to Adila and David. Take it away, guys.
Thank you all for joining us this morning. I'm so excited that the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce has really continued to stay focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's a topic that is in the news a lot lately, and we are always grateful that we're able to expand our knowledge on these topics. That lovely picture on the screen is a picture of David Pease and I. I first met David through the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce, the Collective Business Racial Equity Initiative. And since then, we have crossed paths several times. That picture was taken at the Educate Maine Summit. And David's my color guru. So I had color that day. I'm a very neutral person. And David brings a lot of sunshine to my life. I moved to Maine 25 years ago from Decatur, Georgia. And when I arrived in Maine, my first job that I took, I was one of only 2 people in my company who identified as African American. Well, 2 people in my network, my immediate network, that identified as African American. And from that moment, I had been wanting to have opportunities to interface with other professionals of color. That was over 25 years ago. Fast forward 7 years ago, we got this idea to create the Third Place, which operated very informally and has slowly grown into a networking organization. So we're a cross-sector network that provides Black Mainers connections to social, career, and economic opportunities. And we've been doing that for 5 years now. And we connect with companies and institutions around the state to help solve problems on getting more individuals of color in their companies, but also to provide opportunities to build social capital within the BIPOC community and outside of the community. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to David so that David can give you an introduction of himself.
Great. Thanks so much, Adila. Again, my name is David Pease. I'm the head of talent, diversity, inclusion, and belonging for Bangor Savings Bank. I've been doing human resources for 40 years, and I started my career in Boston, again, 40 years ago. So you can imagine that diversity was an issue in Boston at that time. I still remember when I brought in our first sort of employees with accents in Boston. I worked for an insurance company, and a lot of our customers were like, "Who do you have on the phones?" I'm like, "Amazing people." I guess I muted myself. Apologies. I was just stating that I'm your director of HR. When the CEO asked me to be officer for the world. And as somebody who's been doing this work for so long, why I love my role as diversity officer of Bangor is I learn every single day. And I just hope that today we can talk about some of my learnings over the 40 years, of course, but more importantly, over the last 9 years. I think I've learned so much about myself, certainly about employment and what we really need to be doing in today's workforce for our employees, and just really how to make sure that we are being respectful and welcoming of all in our workplaces. So I look forward to the conversation.
Thanks, David. oftentimes when we talk about racial equity, kind of embodied in that is linguistic and cultural equity as well. And one of the things that I think is at the core of racial equity is ensuring that race no longer predicts a person's outcome. So within the spectrum of our workforce, we have several forms of equity that we try to achieve. And I think that racial equity has gotten a lot of play because it's been in the news a lot. But when we talk about equity and workforce equity, racial equity is one of many elements of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I just want to get from your perspective, you shared a little bit about why it matters to you, but why does this continue to matter? And why in this moment is it important for us to really keep these dialogues going and really talk about what's working? And so what's working at Bangor Savings Bank and why does it matter?
There's lots of things working. There's lots of things that we still need to work on. So, I mean, I think first and foremost, I think every organization in the state of Maine would want to represent, our population and ensuring that we draw employees from all I keep going on to mute. I'm not sure what's going on with that. Is to make sure that we're pulling representatives from all parts of our community, that we are connecting with our customers. So first of all, I think when we have a diverse workforce, we can diversify our customer base, and that's good for business. Obviously, we also really need to be innovative. The world is changing rapidly, and it's going to be pretty hard for us to stay on top of all the needs and make the changes we need without really diverse points of view. And again, I think that what I see with younger workers, because I do a lot of work with younger workers, they're just looking for collaboration. They're looking for impact, and they're really looking kind of for sustainability. So I think those are some of the reasons it matters.
When we spoke earlier, maybe a couple weeks ago, you had mentioned how Bangor Savings hires for the whole person, and you used the three things that you hire for. And when we talk about core people first principles, how do we build in racial equity into finding those core people first principles in the people that you hire?
And that's the most important part of this, right? I mean, diversity is not like some program that an organization puts into place. It really is about what is your culture, right? What is your organization culture? And what do you really value? And then once you understand what your culture is and once you value it, then of course you start bringing people in and ensuring that everyone that works for you shares the same values. That will make sure that it's not just words on a paper, but it's actually the way you live. So at Bangor Savings Bank, sort of our promise to our employees, to our customers, and to the communities that we serve is you matter more. So you matter more means a lot of different things. If you asked our 1,200 employees, you would get a lot of different definitions as to what it means. But what it really means is about that we care and respect about, our people. It's all about people. It's all about relationships. So two of the factors, and this was something that was created well before I got there, but I ensure that we do this every single time. First of all, we want to make sure that people have integrity. We're working with people's money and their private information. We're working a lot in collaboration to get things done. And so people need to trust us. So we really make sure that everyone that we hire has that level of integrity. Second of all, is we want kindness. We know we are looking for kind people. We know when there are jerks working in your environment, it kind of affects the whole culture. It brings everybody down. And I've never worked with kinder, happier people than what we're doing. And what's so interesting, right, is if somebody's not doing well from a performance perspective, we will give them 10 times to try to make it work. But if you lie one time, or if you're unkind, probably 2 times, you're asked to leave the organization. We're really committed to keeping this relationship of integrity and kindness. And as I have a lot of responsibility for our internship, our co-op programs, our young professional evolving, sort of emerging professionals. And in that, we're really looking for people who are either have experienced or are open to working with multiple cultures and diversity. That's an element that we look for in young professionals. And the other thing is I'm just looking for people who want to save the world. My mom still says I wanted to save the world. And I don't know that I'm saving the world, but I think I'm having a positive impact on Maine and in New Hampshire where we work. And that's kind of what we're looking for emerging young people, is they too want to make us as a company, but we want to make our workplace and our communities a better place. And so I think that's what we look for in terms of all employees coming into Bangor Savings Bank.
Thanks, David. One of the reasons why I wanted to join you in this conversation is I've long had an admiration for Bangor Savings Bank. When you walk into Bangor Savings Bank, at least in my own experience, and it's been rather consistent over the years, the assets, the people assets are spot on. And I think that from a customer facing side and internally, it feels as though you all have built something that is around true recognition of people and making people feel seen. I feel that every time I walk in a Bangor Savings Bank branch. Can you tell me a little bit about what it is that you actually teach people about that aspect? Because I think when we think about racial equity in the workforce, we think about it strictly from the standpoint of racial minorities. But a lot of times when we go into places, we're not given eye contact sometimes. And that's something that I always look for. People who are in customer service positions who acknowledge me when I walk in, and how much that means to people who are perceived as different.
Yeah, I mean, we surprisingly, and what's so interesting is we have 70 different branch locations throughout Maine and New Hampshire, and my view over 9 years and going to 70 locations is they're all doing it. But we don't do specific training to say, here's how you treat people. We just treat all of our employees with dignity and respect. And we talk about the importance of doing that for all of our customers. That is all we're doing. And each person is finding it within themselves. When you hire the right people, they find it within themselves as to how to do this. The one thing I definitely learned, and this was actually the first thing we did as a bank 7 years ago when I took on the new role, was to do training, a bystander training, which is really, it's called Green Dot, and it's really about how do we create a safe environment. And it really started with physical safety for our employees and our customers. And so tell the story really quickly. So we were working with this organization. We trained 25 of our employees to be trainers. We were super excited about rolling this out to the bank, and we were working with a consultant, and they started talking to our employees and saying, do you see any concern with us rolling out this Green Dot bystander training? And some of our frontline staff actually gave feedback that, well, that's a nice thing to say, but I'm harassed on a regular basis by customers. And I was kind of like, what? And so then I started reaching out to other tellers throughout our region to make sure it wasn't just kind of an isolated situation. And I was hearing the same stuff, that on a regular basis, our customers were being very disrespectful, being inappropriate, and scaring some of our employees. And so then I started reaching out to all of our branch managers going like, what's going on? And they're like going, yeah, this is just what it's like to work on the front line, David. And sort of this is how we have to put up with because the customer's first. And I'm like, the customer's not first if they're mistreating you. Like the first thing is we need to respect each other. So after discovering this, I had to go deliver this message to our CEO and the bank's leadership team. And, just kind of talking and getting really excited about the program. But I said, here's something that we heard. And I can't go out and say, we're going to create a safe environment if this is happening. So I need to know that we are going to have the courage to tell even very high wealth individuals, somebody with $10 million in the bank, that if they're mistreating our employees, they need to stop or they need to find another bank. It started with our CEO, and they went around the board table, and every single one of them said yes. And what has been so amazing is time and time again, I have seen our bank tell very, influential, really high wealth people, we respect you and your family. Please do the same to our family. And if they don't, we ask them to find another bank. So when an organization does that, our employees know we're trying to keep them safe. And because of that, we now empower all of our employees to make sure that we're creating, first of all, a safe environment for them and for our customers. So just that one empowerment of like, we need your help to create safety and inclusion, I think has been a major part of our culture. And once you create the safe space, then people are going to be more willing to tell you what they need, right? Employees aren't truthful if they don't trust you. Employees don't tell you the truth if they're not emotionally, psychologically, and physically safe. So to me, that's the number one thing every culture has to do, is if you want your employees to act right and you want them to speak the truth, you have to create safety for them.
Thanks, David. And just to touch on a couple of these points is, how does Bangor Savings really honor lived experience and non-traditional career pathways? Are there opportunities where people can get involved in banking that may not have that kind of linear career path?
Yeah, I mean, that's the million-dollar question, right? Is there so many different avenues that we need to look at this, right? So number one thing, of course, is that we need to build some of our own talent. And we have invested a lot of time, money, and energy into internship programs, co-op programs, management trainee programs, so at least we can bring new people into the industry. And, again, they're very competitive processes. I would say they're really compelling experiences right now. Our interns and management trainees are meeting with our CEO in Bangor. Super excited for them. Wish I was there, but I'm glad I'm with you and all of these folks in Portland or Greater Portland. So that's one way. We also know that people need extra help. So we've been very involved with the Portland Adult Ed and the Lewiston Adult Ed programs that have worked on a program called Today's Tellers. So this really has been a very exciting program. I think we just finished up year 6 with Portland Adult Ed and year 2 with Lewiston Adult Ed. But this is where banks have really gotten together in partnership and collaboration. And we've been really working with immigrant community. And it's just been an incredible sort of experience to see folks from other countries, generally, as you know, very highly educated. Several of them have been in the banking industries, and they come here, and some of their credentials aren't truly honored. And so this program is a way for us to meet them and to get them started in careers in banking in the United States. So, that's been, really beneficial. But there's still, I would still say it's hard to bring certain people in at certain entry points, right? And this is a big challenge I'm working on right now with the Maine Bankers Association and New Hampshire bankers. What are entry points for a wide variety of people? If we've got somebody with 20 years of experience from healthcare or from education, where do we appropriately place them in the organization to get started and to really make an impact? And so that is something, that we're really working on. I can do little programs at Bangor Savings Bank, but I think this is, where we really need to do partnership. I mean, one of my big advices for all of the employers out there is, if you're not in some partnerships with some amazing education providers, with wonderful community organizations to help diversify your workforce, you need to have partnerships. This is more than just what one individual organization and one employer can do. We really need to kind of work together on making this happen.
A lot of times what we see with companies who are kind of just starting their journey, or who have been on their racial equity journey, or just their equity journey in general, when there is a move to really diversify the workforce, it kind of ends at diversifying the workforce, and it does not necessarily look at advancement. What are some ways that you all make advancement a priority and use a racial equity lens to do so?
Yeah, and again, I think as you said, there's a lens, but surprisingly, at Bangor Savings Bank, I mean, I know that advancement and career development is really important, and I meet with hundreds of employees every year on their career development. Some very focused, and just people who ask me. But we have 1,200 employees, and it was very interesting. A couple of years ago, when our DI Council just went out and had listening tours, so we really wanted employees to talk to employees. We didn't want our CEO does this often. I'm out talking to employees a lot, but we really wanted this to be an employee-to-employee conversation. And we definitely heard that some people did not feel like they were getting the attention, the career development that they needed. And that was really concerning for me, right? It was very, very concerning. And the question was really like, how do we create a sense of belonging? So that was very interesting, because as HR people, we often look at like engagement. Like, to me, like, our employees engaged. And we know our employees have like 92% engagement, which is a pretty high score, right? But as I started having conversations with more and more employees, I realized that even engaged people didn't have a full sense of belonging if they were not getting career and development attention, or if they could not see themselves in a future job. So this was kind of a new learning. I've tried to do research. I've seen no research out there. I've talked to a lot of employees. Nobody else is sort of hearing this from our employees, but I believe our employees, and I don't think our employees are alone, is if they can't see a future for themselves in the organization, they are likely to leave. So I think the importance of career development is super important. So some of the things that we have put into place is, first of all, we've done training. So I think I'm really good at career development. That's how I started my career. So I think it's been kind of one of my superpowers as an HR person. So I just developed training with our employee development group, and we went out and trained all managers. Here's what employees need and want. And we give a lot of scenarios and just really try to get each manager more comfortable doing career discussions. We also have been very successful at setting up mentor programs. So for instance, our management trainees, they get one of the alumni in the management training program as they're coming in to help onboard them. I'm there through their whole journey, which is 10 to 12 months. And then we give them another member of leadership committee as an executive mentor 90 days in. And we're working actually also with an outside consultant who's doing some leadership and team building with us. And we give them like an executive coach. So that's pretty rare, right? To give brand new professionals an executive coach. So we've seen a lot of success with some of the programs we've done using mentors. So we have now set up a mentor program for all employees. And I've done videos, and we have really tried to say to any employee, mentors are a really great way of getting visibility, getting attention, and getting direction. We really would encourage it. And so that's one thing that we're doing. We're giving people an opportunity to really shadow other departments. So that's still a thing, right? Even when you work in an organization, you don't know necessarily what other departments and groups are doing. So I think just looking and exploring, giving employees a chance to explore, is really, really valuable. And then kind of like the other thing that we need to remember is some of the stuff, no matter how well we plan, some of our best things are done by discovery. So we have a very vibrant internship program, and we literally have 200 students plus competing for like 10 spots. But we had a couple of employees who had to have internships for a graduation requirement. And they came to us and said, any way that we can do an internship and do our jobs. And we're like, sure, we'll give you a project along with your job. We'll take away a few hours of your job so you can do the project. And this has now turned into one of our best recruiting and retention tools, which is allowing our employees who are also students to do internships. So this summer, 4 of our employees working part-time in their core job and spending half time working on a bank project. So that was all kind of just done as a courtesy. But now I'm talking to new people and they're saying, we came to work for you because we knew you would give us an internship. So again, some things you just have to be, you have to try things, and sometimes they can work out better than you ever thought.
One of the things that you mentioned, and I'm sorry I'm having you talk so much. I'm trying to preserve my voice. One of the things that you mentioned is that, like, if someone doesn't see themselves advancing in the company, that they're not willing, they're probably not likely to stay. And a lot of times in our network, I get a lot of people who, that when they go to apply for a job, they'll come and ask us, do you know anyone in management positions in this company? Do you know any people of color in this company? And so on the other side of seeing opportunities for advancement from the perspective of communities of color, being able to see other people of color who have advanced through the company is very important. Yesterday, I met a couple of women who work with a local bank, but are outside of Maine, and I was pleasantly surprised to see 2 Black women in vice presidential roles. I was only supposed to meet with one, and like the other person came, and it gave me just more confidence in the conversation that we were having around opportunities to build advancement in that particular bank, because there was a desire and there was conversations coming from other people of color that wanted to create pathways, and that was very important for me to actually be able to take that message and bring that message to our networks, to be able to say, this company might not be there, but this is their plan, and this is how these individuals have advanced through the organization. So it's very important in that regard as well.
Well, that's the important part, right? Is like, I view DI as more as a lens than a program, right? So obviously we have to look at all parts of our organization. Our board, for instance, has been very thoughtful about diversifying the board, because we know if women or people of color are interested in Bangor Savings Bank, they're going to want to see at the highest levels that, you know, women and people of color are represented, the same in our management. So we've worked really hard. So, you know, just really pleased that out of our board of 10, we have 2 people of, you know, 2 BIPOC members. We have 50% women, and our chair is a female. And our bank leadership, it's 50%. 55%, I think, women in leadership, not as good in BIPOC. So we are continuing to work for it, but it's so important, right? If we expect people from different groups to be coming to our organizations, they have to see themselves in our organization. It's so important. And it's really powerful. I mean, when I started with Bangor Savings Bank, you know, 9 years ago, I'm just very visible in the LGBT community, and like, I think there are only a couple of out employees. Now there are a lot of out proud gay people at Bangor Savings Bank, and they feel safe. They know if I can be my authentic self and I'm respected the way that I am in the bank, that they know that they will be treated with respect as well. So you really do need to have those people in power to help really create safe, authentic places for everyone. But I love your point about, network and context, right? And that to me is the power of Maine, right? We literally, you and I can probably reach anyone in the state of Maine with just reaching out to one person. I think it's like 1 degree of separation here, right? And that is super powerful. Last night I was at an intern event with Maine Career Catalyst. So about 160 college students at Bayside Bowl. And because we're sponsoring, Bangor Savings Bank is sponsoring these kickoff events throughout the state. I said, your network is so important. And like, we just need to continue to help each other understand we can help each other. And that's why I said, you may not want to work for Bangor Savings Bank, but I know a lot of people, so I can probably help open the door for you. And I know, Dill, when we were doing our co-op sort of search at with the Root Institute, you had met one of the young men, Daniel, and you sent out a message like going, I hope he gets full attention and access to your co-op program. And that just message from you just made a difference. Like, okay, Daniel was doing really well, but once we got your endorsement on Daniel, it was like, okay, we need to do everything to hire Daniel. We've been working with Daniel for the last 5 months. He's delightful, wonderful. And so network is really important. And being able to endorse and sponsor people for each other, I think, is, again, part of that partnership of trying to, get the right people and the right jobs in the right organizations.
Yeah, and speaking of that network, I would have never met Daniel and other students without our partnership with the Rue Institute. So, we partnered with the Rue Institute on our STEM network. And so that was how we were able to connect. And through that, we connect younger early career professionals to individuals in our community as well. So, it's one network feeding the other.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's what's so amazing, right? I mean, talking about the Rue, it's just been exciting. We have been working with 8 international STEM students, and we've had a long-standing relationship with the Rue. But I think this relationship has really, deepened our relationship. Just so proud of them bringing so much international talent to the state of Maine. But, more employers need to take advantage of these brilliant students who need to do co-ops as part of their graduation. Understanding that STEM students, once they graduate, can stay in the United States, guaranteed for 3 years. So this is just a workforce that I think is really being underutilized, by a lot of Maine employers, simply because they don't understand it. But the Rue is just a great, partner. But I think this is also, it's not just that we hired these folks because they were international students. That's just an added benefit. But I think this is what DI really means to me. So just to tell you a brief story, one of the students, a Chinese student, actually lost her visa. Her visa was revoked while she was a co-op with us. And it was scary, right? It was really scary for her. I happened to be overseas at the time. So I'm texting as people were trying to handle stuff, just making sure she stayed safe. But although she was just a temporary employee for us, although just a short-term student for us, Bangor Savings Bank went to bat. Our CEO called senators to see if there was anything else we could do. We used our attorney to help look at options to appeal the situation. We could have easily just said, good luck, it was nice working with you. But DI means taking care of people when they need the most help and they need the most support. And, I was just so blown away, and still am blown away, but just all that we did for this temporary student. And then I'm thinking, okay, we did it one time, we're good. And then actually just, like a month later, this just happened recently, our head of our DI council reached out to me and said, David, this former employee, so again, former employee of Bangor Savings Bank, that was part of the Today's teleprogram, I think in the first or second year, has been detained by ICE in New York. Is there anything we can do? And I sent a text to our CEO and said, is there anything we can do? And then worked with our HR department to provide support to this former employee to, just write letters and letters of support, how great he was as an employee and how much, we appreciated all that he did for us, his great contributions to us in the state of Maine. And he was just released last week. So that is what DI means to me. It is not a program. It's not about checking it off. It's about doing the right thing again, when you could just simply say, okay, we have other business to do.
Yeah. And when you're doing the right thing for all of your employees, racial equity being a piece of that, it's built into the fabric of the organization. So it just naturally flows. It's amazing that you all can support your employees and former employees in that way.
Right. And again, you have a slide up on the screen on recruiting, and it really enhanced recruiting. So we had 8 incredible co-ops working with us from January, and they're going to be presenting their final projects to us in 2 weeks. I've been coaching them. We're getting super excited about them doing that. But we are bringing on 3 more co-ops from July to December. We received 600 applicants, and we only posted on the Northeastern website. So we did not even do a public posting. We only went to Northeastern. Obviously, we can't, even handle 500 or 600 applications. I think there were 60 applications from the RU itself here in Maine. So I think we interviewed 30 folks to get to our 3 final people. But that, again, is the power of doing the right thing. Other people realize it, right? Other people see it, and you become an employer of choice. You become an employer people want to work for. So the better you're doing on the retention end and on the experience end, then it really does make the recruiting side so much easier.
Yeah, I didn't add this to the slide, but I know that there was, I meet with a lot of the RU students a lot. And the perpetual fear is that an employer might not be willing to take a chance on me because there's a need to obtain a visa. And so there were students who were getting to the first and second rounds of interviews, and then kind of let go once there was this feeling that they were kind of strung along, but the potential to, have to, sponsor a visa in the future felt like it was a deterrent. And a lot of the students felt that. What is something that how has Bangor Savings really dealt with the issue of visas? And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's about educating yourself, right? I mean, I think this is a great future topic for, Portland Region Chamber to look at. We actually did Live and Work in Maine, did a great sort of panel at the RU, including RU and immigration attorney, and I sort of spoke from an employer's perspective. But we just have to educate ourselves. These students all have visas and have the ability to work in the United States. And as I said, even once they graduate, STEM students can stay for 3 years. So I think it's really about educating ourselves, understanding those types of visas we can work with, those we cannot, really understanding on both sides what we can and cannot do. So I think it's mostly about just really understanding it. And there's some positions that aren't perfect, for students or for employees or candidates with visas, but we're very honest, right? And we're making it very clear that there are other positions that we can sponsor and support them, but maybe a specific position they applied for, they can't. So I think it's about just truly educating yourself, understanding what you can and who you can work with, and then just being really honest about that, because I think we all just want the truth, right? If I can't work with you on something, just letting you know instead of wasting time or getting excited, but simply, and then me helping you find roles that will fit your immigrant status, then we're good, right? So it's really just a lot of education. So all I would say is everyone, on the call, if you haven't, worked with visas, you haven't worked with international students, they're incredible. They're so talented, and they bring so much to your cultures and organizations. And, that's the thing, the co-op, the international students, yes, of course they brought, some great work ethic. They were doing some technical work that most of our employees can't even do. So they're bringing a great strength to the work, but they're just really bringing their full selves. And we're learning an awful lot about these people, their cultures, and it's making Bangor Savings Bank a better place.
So you touched on recruitment, and one of the big best practices in recruitment is, which isn't on the PowerPoint, unfortunately, is recruiting where racial minorities are, or recruiting where there's a greater level of racial diversity. What practices do you all employ, whether it be the bias-free job descriptions or structured interviews or blind resume screening? What type of tools do you all use to ensure that, other than like the face-to-face recruiting efforts, to make sure that you're bringing in individuals from a variety of different backgrounds to the organization?
Yeah, so it's a lot of work, right? It's a lot of work to get a fully diverse, slate of candidates. I do a lot of work, with colleges. So I make sure not only going to general career fairs, but I'm going to, women in business and women who code and multicultural diversity clubs and organizations. So part of it is understanding that you may have to really target when you're on campuses or when you're in your communities. Just make sure that you're going and sponsoring and supporting folks from, all backgrounds. So the first thing is they need to, feel really good about you and that you are a great place to work. So it's more than just going to a career fair or going to a college fair. You really need to work with specific groups in the community and on colleges. Second of all, I'm just a really firm believer in acknowledging that everyone has bias. And I think one of the ways to kind of really alleviate that in the recruiting process is just keep talking about it with folks, but just really believe in group interviewing. So just really making sure that that I have a panel or have a group of people who represent our complete employee base and our community. And that, again, is attractive to the candidates as they're being interviewed, that they're seeing a wide range of people. And it also ensures that if one individual has a bias, or we each have biases, but that our collective biases is not harming one group of employees. But I still keep checking and looking at what I believe are characteristics of our applicants to make sure that a group of people don't seem to be being missed. So it is something you have to keep working on, right? And it's sometimes really interesting what you discovered. So at Bangor Savings Bank, it was not race, it was not, LGBT status, it was not disability that we sort of had a bias for. We actually in Bangor had a bias for local. So like when somebody locally applied, they would immediately reach out to them, but somebody from away, and again, these were all kinds of candidates. They were not necessarily even diverse candidates. They just weren't from Bangor, Maine. Sometimes they didn't reach out to them. And I am out and about, every night almost in somewhere in Maine. And I kept meeting people who had just moved to the Bangor region. They met me and they're like, yeah, I've applied for a couple of jobs. I have not even gotten a response. And they were like these incredible humans. I'm like, what? So I really challenged, some of the leaders from Bangor going, guys, if somebody has the qualifications, call them. Like, even if you don't hire them, call them, because someone else in the organization is probably going to be interested in them. So that was just a kind of a discovery that we made, and it was something that we could fix. So I think that's part of what happens. We're so busy doing the work, we don't really take time to assess what's working and what's not working. Where are we having success and where are we not having success? What groups might have some bias that has been built into our process? So I think all of that are things, that employers have to do. But the one thing I would say is keep talking to your employees. Your employees know the truth. Your employees totally know what's happening when it comes to recruiting and retaining everybody. So keep talking to them. We continue to ask, the DI Council continues to ask, what can we do to make this a more inclusive culture? What can we do to be creating a greater sense of belonging? So I mentioned to you, in our first round, when we were doing listening tours, we definitely were hearing from our employees about career development. And I talked to you about, we listened to our employees, we've built in a lot of things, and we've actually included a belonging metric now in our surveys. So we're actually now measuring the, hopefully the improvement, although it's pretty high right now, but to continue to improve upon sense of belonging. But we just did a mini survey, just like 5 questions on belonging. So we just wanted to try to get some more information from our employees based upon the broader survey. And one of the discoveries was we still need to do better work on career development. So I'm hearing it, and we're going to make some enhancements. We actually have an intern working specifically on career development content, if you will, for our website and for us to go out and talk to employees about. But a second part and a new piece came out that I thought was really a valid concern. And that was several of our employees are saying their manager is not advocating for them for career. So that's something very different, right? So now we've got some managers doing some career coaching, but we do have a lot of managers who are not going to bat and who are not really doing extra things to get their people considered for succession planning or for other types of development opportunities. So I think that's a real issue that we need to work on to make sure that all of our managers are really lifting up our best and brightest. And this is a way, again, to make sure that diverse candidates are being seen by all of leadership. Our employees are telling us, our employees are guiding us on how to do DEI when they know you're going to listen without judgment and without fear of, oh my God, I made a small complaint about what things we can do better. So to me, continuing to ask your employees what to do for recruiting and retention is, I think, your best strategy.
It sounds like there's a lot of ongoing dialogue, and I don't want to make assumptions, but it feels like an exceptional workplace.
I'm not sure if it's exceptional, but if you're in an employee-driven culture, which we are, the only way you can stay that way, right? Because that's the thing with culture, and that's the thing with being a good employer. It's not stagnant, right? People's needs keep changing, and so our CEO has a monthly call with all employees. He goes out and talks to groups of people all the time. Other leaders go and talk. But actually, what's been really amazing, Adila, is that since probably November, the biggest question he's gotten from our full employee base is, are we still in DEI? So after the election, our employees, so this was not leadership. These are not the people worrying about DEI from a business or an innovation perspective. This was from our employees about, like, we just want to be treated respectfully and want to continue to be respectful of everyone. They were asking, are we still in? So that's a pretty amazing thing when your employees are asking, we're still doing this, right? And I just happened to see 2 board members at a big event we were doing a few weeks ago. And the first thing that the chair said to me, like, David, we have you. We're discussing this at the board meeting. And they've talked about our continued commitment 3 times this year at board meetings. So, when it is really part of your culture, I'm not sure if it's exceptional, but that's when the work gets done, right? Like, everybody at all levels need to be continuing to not take this for granted and continue to work on it.
Yeah. And I'm curious because one of I meet with HR managers sometimes and folks who are in DEI, sometimes at the same company, and they're just totally not communicating with each other. There's the DEI work and there's the HR work. And then there's the trainings. And so there's always like, we have these trainings, they're not really working or moving forward. And it's usually because they're not well integrated throughout the organization. How does Bangor Savings ensure that they're integrated throughout the organization? Are there actual trainings or is there how did it start? How did you get there?
Yeah, I still wonder how we did what we did, and I'm still working on making it more. So Yeah, I mean, the good news is because of my HR background and I was overseeing, the current director of HR used to report to me, the current employee development person used to report to me. So, we have a really strong relationship. And you're absolutely right. Oftentimes DI people are not fully aligned with HR. So if you have two different functions, you need to make sure that and of course, they need to be aligned with your leadership's strategic plan. So the first thing is making sure that all of our we don't have a specific strategic initiative called DI, but we have several of our strategic highlights. DI is certainly in place, and we can reference it in our work. Then, of course, when we do training, we're trying we will do individual. We've done bias training, we've done cultural competency training, we've done being an inclusive leader training. So we've done a lot of various DI trainings. But of course, part of that is you need to do reinforcement. Training is really useless unless you reinforce the learnings, right? So one of the things that we do really well to keep our culture solid is we do daily check-ins. So for 10 to 15 minutes a day, we do things called connects. And whether you're in a branch or I'm in Portland or I'm in Bangor, there's connects going all over. So I just find a connect and we spend 10 to 15 minutes on just what's happening in the bank, what's going on with customers, but oftentimes we will infuse DI. We definitely reinforce this whole green dot training. So the green dot training, one of the biggest things that's done for us is that when people are saying something that maybe isn't great, another employee will simply say red dot. And red dot is just kind of this check to sort of say, oops, somebody just said something that wasn't great, or somebody's not feeling good about the situation. And it's so interesting to see people reset immediately and then just continue the conversation. So it's really about daily reinforcements, right? It's about really enforcing these learnings and to bring up examples when we're not doing it and giving shout outs. So recognition is very important, right? Recognizing. So several of our employees want to do more. So our DI Council has actually kind of created sort of this initiative to just sort of give people a chance to really say, I'm an ally for DI, and I really, and then we're going to recognize them, with just some, basic trinket to say, yes, you are a great ally and ambassador for this work. I am doing something just called Spot Awards, which is when somebody does something really great for our culture, creating more inclusion in our culture. I'm just going to meet with them, give them a small gift, make a big deal about it, and sort of recognize them. So part of this is you need to keep reminding people of it on a regular basis, and you need to recognize really good behavior. And you just need to talk about when things don't go right? And not again to be judgmental or, but as a learning point, right? So we don't really get too upset about when people make a mistake. We just try to talk about, so what can we learn from this?
Thanks. And I know there's probably small businesses that are on the call that don't have diversity panels and HR directors and stuff as well. There's some resources in the community. There's an organization called a company called IntWork that specializes in BIPOC recruiting that can be really beneficial for those companies that need extra support in hiring from those particular communities that might not have the necessarily skills or personnel to bring people into the company. So aside from really co-creating opportunities with partners and nonprofit organizations, there are specific businesses that provide that level of support. You've talked a lot about, different ways you guys go about recruiting. You kind of hit on all these topics already in terms of how you have internal equity advocates and rotate individuals to jobs and allow them to see other areas of the company. Is there any other innovative ways that you think both small and large businesses could employ that might not be as utilized as it should be?
Yeah, and as everything I've just been talking about most of it is very low cost, right? So I'm very sensitive that we have a lot of smaller organizations, and I do talk to nonprofits and small business all the time. I actually am mentoring several startup companies right now because, you know, the importance of starting your business with this DI lens and making sure that you really understand how to treat employees in today's market and in future markets, because again, we have to really manage the full person, right? And we all need to, as employers, need to be more aware of that. But I think, you know, one of the biggest, you know, things or biggest piece of advice I can give people is just remember why people work. I mean, obviously they need a paycheck to live, but that's not really what motivates them, right? So I think as we're building our jobs and as we're building, you know, as we're going out in the community and talking about our, you know, our opportunities and you know, coming to our organizations to work, we just need to remember what people are looking for, right? So the first thing is people want to do meaningful work. So I, even in the banking industry, I've challenged Bangor Savings Bank and I've challenged Maine bankers and New Hampshire bankers. Some of our jobs are just plain boring. And like, we need to make sure that if we want to attract the best and brightest people, we need to continue to look at job design and making sure that every job has purpose and every job can build expertise and where people can feel like their efforts are really worthwhile and they're really making a difference in people's lives. And the people who I'm seeing coming into the banking world are attracted to our commitment to community, our commitment to employees, and just really seeing a future for themselves. So like, that's part of what you need to create if you want people coming to your organization. The second thing that I have already mentioned is appreciation. Appreciation costs nothing. Like, these are not big awards. This is just telling people they're doing good work. So when they come on board and you're providing them meaningful work, then they know they need to hear occasionally that their work is great and that they're really important. And like, I start new people off by saying, you were picked, we're going on this great adventure, and you're going to hear a lot of feedback from me. Most of it's going to be positive, but occasionally you're going to hear some growth feedback, and let's have fun with it. So like, we just need to continue to appreciate. One of the things that a lot of organizations don't do, and it costs nothing, but it is a discipline again, is just allowing employees to have a voice. Part of the reason employees are not really great at telling you what they need or want is because they haven't had a lot of opportunities at work to do so. So all organizations can find ways to have their CEO or a senior leader go out and talk to employees, to have employees who are really committed to your culture to talk to employees about what else you can be doing to attract and to keep really great people. Again, development is an important one, but it isn't all about spending lots of money. It's just really having great conversations with people. What is it that you want to do? How can we enhance your current job to be more challenging? How can we give you new responsibilities? And trying to help employees understand that development is not just with a raise or with a promoted title, although you should look at titles because titles are a really cheap way of recognizing people, but it's really about giving people opportunities to grow and learn. That's what they're really looking for. And finally, people just need to feel connected. They need to find their community within your larger organization, right? So who are people they trust? Who are people that can mentor them? So you do need to just be looking at how to create, an internal community for each employee to feel like they really belong, even if it's just to one friend and one sort of leader who will be there to be their advisor and mentor. So those are things that don't cost money, but they do take discipline, and they take a reminder to all people in management to work on these things.
We talked a little bit about community co-creation, and I just wanted to explain this picture that's here. Is Jamie from Evo Rock. She's one of the leaders at the Climbers of Color, and the Climbers of Color kind of came out of like an individual who was working at the organization and wanted to build that community in Evo Rock. And I think that like sometimes when we think of like these initiatives, We think of like, the larger organizations, but these smaller companies benefit greatly from, say, this employee or there's a couple of people who work there who run this group who are bringing in customers, just simply by creating like an affinity space. And I would have never, ever stepped foot into Evo Rock had it not been for Climbers of Color. And I would never be encouraging my kids to climb if it had not been for Climbers of Color. So there are a number of different ways from the employee side and the customer side that set the groundwork for potential employees for a company. Folks who have walked through the door are always potential employees. So that's something to always keep in mind.
Well, I think you also bring up a really good point about how we all need to keep our minds open, right? And so we're very big believers that part of the work experience is about exposing people to different things. For anyone that follows my social media, I'm constantly taking pictures of, especially our young professionals. But last week, we took our co-ops and our management trainees to Portland Headlight, and we flew kites, right? And we also did buy them lobster rolls, which not everyone could do, but we did that. We then went to a goat farm, and just seeing these young people just playing with baby goats and just experiencing, like, some of them had never even been in a farm before. So I think we just need to remember that part of our ways of staying empathetic and staying tolerant and aware as we ourselves have to continue to expose ourselves to different things, and making sure that our employees are seeing different people in different situations is the way that we sort of build I think just real connectiveness and real empathy, which is, so important currently in our country and in our state. So yeah, I think just new experiences and trying new things is really important for this work.
Yeah. And so we've been going back and forth in our conversations around retention and recruitment. They're so intrinsically entwined with one another. Do you all do specific state interviews? I know you mentioned that you all have the conversations and stuff, but are there actual interviews with employees?
I don't think it's formalized. I mean, I think, again, we sort of do weekly check-ins. So managers are supposed to be doing weekly check-ins with employees. So I think that's one avenue to really be talking about folks. As I said, we, I think HR, employee development, have a lot of opportunities to talk. I think DI is using our DI council more employee to employee. So I think there's lots of opportunities, but there's still, we also have feedback tools. So just last week, I got a feedback from someone who's mid-career who felt like they were not really getting the attention they deserved and really wanted a mentor. And I'm thinking to myself, like, there is an opportunity for you to have a mentor. And if you would tell me who you are, I would help you find the mentor, right? So we still have situations where someone is not getting what they're needing and they just don't raise their hand. So, but we don't, specifically have stay interviews. We don't really use exit interviews. I think we send one off, but we really just believe in talking to people. We really believe in, like, if we can create a culture where people just feel safe talking to us, then that's how we can make change. And most of all of our best changes, right, have come from when employees say, this isn't great. So when I first got to the bank, you had to be there for quite a while to get really great paid leave. And one of our, newer employees was going out, I think with their second child, and just said to Bob, like, this kind of stinks. Why should I have to be here for 10 years to get the maximum amount of time off? So several years ago, we did immediately go to all of our employees. So you could be a brand new employee on the second day if you went out, on leave for birth or adoption of a child or other medical reason, you would have 4 months of paid leave. And, so that came from employees. When we were working on our first racial equity statement, we sort of sent it out to our DI council as just a check to say, what do you guys think about this? And one of them was very vocal and said, David, this is like a softball, policy. Like, I thought we were going to play hardball here. And I was like, ouch. But the great news is that one person's feedback and sort of brought her in and really met, with some of the people creating this policy. And we modified, enhanced the policy based upon one employee's point of view. So I think we just, as long as people feel safe, they will continue to tell you when you need to make adjustments.
Thanks.
That's Amma and Daniel. They're great.
Yeah, we've touched on so many of these topics already. What I think that as I was preparing for this and thinking about, like, what do you talk when you talk about racial equity? And I've been to so many talks about racial equity. When we talk about metrics, and all that stuff is important. Bias, the training, what to look out for. And before we got on the call, you mentioned, like, we need to start talking about what has been working. What is I find it kind of like the joy in the process. And I think as I'm like, our folks who are deep into racial equity training will probably view this conversation as a softball racial equity training. But one of the things that I found, the companies that I get the most feedback about around being great places to work for people of color are those that are just great places to work in general. And when we create a workforce and a workplace that asks everyone what their needs are, whether it be, their needs because they are a racial minority, or their needs because they are a single dad, or their needs because they are a single mom, or have challenges, are neurodivergent. When you create that container, the emphasis, and I actually hesitate to say it because I know that racial equity, and there are very specific metrics and things to track, and opportunities that are still prevalent, challenges that are still prevalent and need to be addressed. But I think one of the key messages is that, how do you create a workplace for all, and how do you do that in a very holistic way with this constant feedback loop? And the retention practices, they aren't that innovative. I think people just don't do it, and people don't necessarily know how to do it, or companies are afraid to really go down that route because they might be seen as doing racial equity, when they can take those same opportunities and that same lens and do that for every employee. But we don't eliminate racial equity and what we're looking at and what lens we're using in that whole spectrum.
I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, if you just have a culture where you're treating everybody with respect, that's the first thing. I mean, but again, and it's hard to measure everything. That's the hardest part with this work is, yes, we can measure, like, how many people of color, age, certain elements, but we're only measuring a few type of diversity dimensions, and all of them are really important. So, like, our board chair was kind of pushing back on me, like, David, you need to do more metrics. And I'm like, I will do some metrics. And as I said, we've built this belonging metric, looking for one nationwide, just saying, I'll just copy it and just get it done with. Couldn't find what I was looking for, so we created our own belonging metric, which I'm really proud and excited about doing for the bank and sharing the results with our leadership. But I want to tell them stories, and just look at this picture. I mean, this was just at an event. We just were happy being together at the event. That is part of the story, right? And it would be very easy. And I actually use myself as an example. I'm like going, it would be really easy to just say old white man, right? And just say, we don't really care about him, right? And it would be, if we just did me as a statistic, then that's fine. But then I shared with them like what it feels like for me to be able to be my true authentic self at Bangor Savings Bank, and how I wasn't able to do that in other organization I worked for. And because I couldn't do that, then my husband did not always feel comfortable attending events by other employers. So I worked for one employer for 8 years, and my husband never went to an event because he didn't really feel welcome. And he would come to any event at Bangor Savings Bank if my boss or my CEO asked him to attend. So just being able to talk about those stories, about what it's really like to feel like you belong, and that you're not you're not the only one. It's, as being the only one sometimes, like I'm willing to do it. I've always been, brave to be the only one on certain things, but it gets tiring. And sometimes we just want to just be part of everything else, right? And when we can truly be ourselves, we can bring our full families to work. That's, that to me is when progress is being made for everyone.
I skipped ahead on a few slides because we have about 15 minutes left for folks to ask questions. But we covered a lot. And I think that I wanted to strike just a different tone with this conversation around racial equity, because it can be such a heavy topic, and it can induce a lot of anxiety for employers and employees. What are some final thoughts you want to leave us with?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think although, we know right now politically things are, challenging, we can't be afraid of the real conversation. This is part of how we develop relationship with people. During, everything that was going on in 2020 with pandemic and Black Lives Mattered, our employees said, we want to talk about race. I mean, we have been around for over 172 years. Like, I don't think the bank had ever had a public discussion on race, right? We'd had lots of conversations in management, but we just opened it up, and we literally thought maybe 20 employees would want to come and talk about just what they were experiencing and feeling. And we ended up getting about 180 people that just kind of came, and we just had conversations about how people were feeling. And we made several discoveries. Some is that people just want more knowledge and education. So we were able to build content based upon employee feedback. But the one thing, and again, this happened, 5 years ago now, and I'd been in HR for 35 years at that time, but a lot of employees realized that they were getting it wrong. And they believed that teaching their children to be colorblind they thought it was a good thing. And then after this conversation, they realized it was not a good thing. So that was our first sign that people just needed help from us as an employer to kind of live their life, and to live their life in a way that they felt proud of, and that they could be allies for people. So we actually have a library of books. Most of them are business books, but we also have a library of diversity books for parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles to be able to read and talk about really tough topics. Obviously, most recently, we've had a lot of public conversation about mental health and neurodiversion. And it's not coming from employees who are dealing with it directly, but their children are dealing with it. And they are very concerned. Parents are very concerned that their children will be discriminated against because of being on the spectrum or having mental or anxiety issues, and they're very concerned about it. So they want to make sure, by having conversations at work, that we're supportive of this and hoping to help figure out how to support their children to find employers who are inclusive to all. So all I would say is, you have to have the conversations. You also are going to get pushback. You know, we are pretty public about all this work that we're doing. We have gotten pushback. You know, we are a big supporter of Equality Maine, and they were doing lobbying on, you know, trans rights in the last session. And, you know, a conservative publication went out to their readership and said, Bangor Savings, Hannaford supports this. They're, you know, really behind trans rights. And we started getting a lot of pushback, to the point where our national PR firm's like, yeah, maybe you want to be careful here. And, you know, I really worked with our CEO and said, they're our partners. We have a lot of LGBT employees, customers, and most importantly, we have a lot of our employees' kids are growing up and they need the resources and support here. And we cannot back off simply because we're getting some pushback from a few customers. And in the end, it all worked out. But you have to go to bat for the things that you believe in. And when you do the right things, most people don't come after you because they're just really proud that you're doing the right thing. So I think that's my final comment.
Yeah. One of the things that I find most companies don't have is specific data around their employees. Specifically, larger employers don't have the data or the qualitative data. So the statistics or the qualitative data when it's in terms of, you know, tracking advancement or even the number of employees of color in their companies. There are ways that companies can collect data, whether it be, you know, or collect information around employee needs. You know, it doesn't even have to be something directly tied to the company. Collecting data around employee needs is important because it really puts into the hands tools that the employer can use to really like prevent and retain some of those employees who might not be in a position to speak up, or might be in a company or institution that it's perhaps not safe to speak up. But when employers don't have that mechanism to get that feedback in some way, there's a risk of creating an environment where racial equity does not exist, where gender equity does not exist. So my final thing would be for companies to really determine how are they getting their information and what are they doing with that information to improve the lives of their workforce and connect more people in a more meaningful way. And as I mentioned before, there are companies that are out there who can support those companies that don't have internal HR departments and expertise in their companies.
Well, and I think sometimes we need to look at data in a different way, right? I mean, pay is a great example. You know, Bangor Savings Bank was one of the first companies that really started talking about living wage and really making major adjustments to our pay practices about a living wage, not just simply a minimum wage. You know, probably that was done started 8 or 9 years ago. And we've been, you know, really focused on that, and I think have done a really good job. We've looked at it from, you know, is there equity with men and women? Are there equity with people of color? We've tried to look at several dimensions and do a comparison to make sure that our pay was equitable. But we're still hearing some concerns, and we just, as a bank, we're able to provide some financial support, and we're just providing a lot of extra financial support for some people, and weren't really clear on that. So we kind of went in and really used some different dynamics in a recent survey that basically looked at the home income, the full family, not just what our individual employee was making, but just really looking at income for the full family. And we discovered that we have some employees based upon their, you know, family income and the number of people in their household that they are just scraping by. And we were a bit shocked, because we had never seen data like that before, because normally you're looking at competitive, compensation data and just making sure that there's an equity. So I think sometimes, there's new ways of looking at data. That's a great thing with data now. There's so many different ways of looking at it. So I think if we think there's a problem, keep looking at the data. We also have a question about just receiving feedback, like an anonymous source of feedback. So we simply have this built into our intranet, and basically we have one for HR issues, one for DI issues, pretty much any workplace issues. So it goes to the appropriate departments, right? And so it's anonymous. People go in, they can put their name if they want, so we can do follow-up, but we just get information that people are concerned about, and then individuals or a group of people will try to work on it and respond to it.
I also see in the chat, made in events. Is it made in events? What are some resources we can use to ensure our job postings reach racially diverse candidate pools, particularly underrepresented communities? This is where the partnerships with community-based organizations is very important. For individuals, for companies, or our partners that have job openings, many times we will put them in our newsletter. Also, like looking your employee pool to see what organizations they might be associated with. If you have any individuals in your organization that are from underrepresented communities, if the environment is such that you can ask them that question, you should ask them that question. If you can't ask them that question, you probably don't have the environment to be welcoming other folks from underrepresented communities. I always say, like, people will say, I would always suggest that, like, people ask their employees. And when people say, well, we don't want to put them on the spot. When you have a workplace culture that is conducive to really that is healthy, those questions feel natural. And so rather than at the same time as asking those questions of where to put the surveys, also ask, where are you showing up? Job postings, a lot of times we will post jobs, share jobs, and if people don't know the company, people aren't connected to the company, it's a bigger gap to fill. So I would say, try to show up to events. I see David, I see all sorts of folks from the chamber who, are recruiting folks at community events. And that's a very good way of connecting to potential employees, because if they see your face, they see your company's name, they're more likely to refer someone to you, or they're more likely to call you up when they see a job posting.
So it looks like we're running out of time. I was definitely hoping to hear some more questions, but it looks like we're out of time. Rachel?
We're approaching 10:30. Of course, just want to encourage people, if something comes up in the next couple of minutes while you're listening to my closing remarks, if you're unable to get your questions in within today's show, I personally sent in sort of celebration of, honoring our final episode in this series, I sent everyone who registered today a personal email with the streaming link. If you want to continue the conversation, please respond back to that email, because I want to hear from you. And you never know, like, if you have a question you want me to pass along to David or Adila, you certainly, I'm happy to do that. And I do know that we follow up today's show with an email with the recording and any additional resources. But if you want to have more of a personal conversation around it, my door is always open. And I know in working with David and Adila, they can say the same thing. They're always willing to help and answer any questions. And, you know, Adila, David, I was dialed in. I'm biased because I'm not biased. But I'm biased because, you know, I helped produce these events, but I was just so engaged the entire time. I soaked everything in like a sponge. Just hearing lived experience, lived worked experience, you know, in real time, in my personal professional opinion, is the best way to kind of absorb this information. And I felt it was so relatable and actually more, I guess, actionable following a training like this, which I think is the root of why we're doing this series. So I truly cannot thank you both enough for taking the time to sit with us all this morning. I won't speak for the audience, but I guess I can. We all want to thank you. So with that, again, thank you for answering everyone's questions this morning. And probably getting ahead of everyone's questions this morning, and providing us with, you know, those important action items that we need to take away and move forward from today's training. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, of course, to the man behind the curtain, my chamber colleague, Riley Legier, for helping to produce today's final episode of Ideas. And I'd be remiss if I did not give another shout out to both Springborn Staffing and Visit Portland for their generous support of this series throughout the season. The chamber and our community truly couldn't have these conversations without that support. So thank you. Of course, thank you for everyone who attended, tuned in this morning, and throughout the rest of the season previous to this month's episode. If you are interested, as I mentioned, in learning more about today's topic and continuing your education, be sure to check your email for a follow-up message with the appropriate contact information and links to additional resources. As I mentioned, you can also just shoot me an email back to my personal email that I sent out this morning with the streaming information. I am always here to answer questions or refer you in the appropriate direction. Again, today was our final episode of Ideas, at least until next season. As I mentioned at the beginning of today's session, there is always more work to be done, and the Chamber is committed to making sure that its community has the tools necessary to create and maintain welcoming workplaces. Keep an eye out for more info about next season in the Chamber's weekly events newsletter. Comes out on Monday every week. All right, everyone, thank you so much for attending. Enjoy the rest of your day. We'll see you again very soon for another season of Ideas.